Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tubeless Creek Instagram Live conversation. I am your host, proprietor Jason Haas. My guest this week is one of three people to hold the Master Sommelier and Master of Wine designations at the same time. And one of the most interesting and involved guys in the world of wine. This is, of course, Doug Frost, based in Kansas City. But he is a writer, he is a sommelier, he is a winery owner. He runs sommelier competitions. He has written books. He does so many interesting things in the world of wine, and I can't wait for you to get a chance to meet him. So, as I always do, while we're waiting for people to join, I am going to share a few pictures as to what's going on here at the winery. So, it is really, really, really beautiful. So I'll give you a sense. So the sun is out after about 2 weeks of rain. We got about 10 inches of rain in those 2 weeks. It is just what the doctor ordered. I published a blog if you want the full story as to how the winter has played out so far. But we're at about 170% of normal rainfall. And yet, despite that, there is essentially no water running in Les Tubeless Creek. I mean, it's a trickle. So that means that all 16 of those inches that we've gotten have soaked in. The sheep are incredibly happy. The cover crops are deep. I took a picture. This is the walk this morning. That's my dog, like shoulders deep in the cover crop in a Roussan block. That's super unusual for January. Normally, we don't get a lot of cover crop growth until it starts to warm up. Usually in February, so we're like a month ahead of usual. Other than that, we are getting ready for the first bottling of the year. We're putting tanks together. We're washing tanks. I have Seb, my younger kid, is out here for a couple of weeks doing some work with us on a break from college. That's his feat. What else do we got? I'll show you a couple of pictures of what it looked like in the rain. Was these sort of gray, drizzly days. We got a lot of days with like a quarter of an inch of rain or a half an inch of rain. We only got a few days over an inch and only one day over about an inch and a half, which is why it's all been able to soak in so well, which has been so nice. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I am going to invite Doug to join, and then hopefully this will all work as smoothly as it did in our test earlier this week. So I'm going to accept his request now. We will see if this works smoothly. It usually does.
Here he is.
Magic.
The magic of technology. The robots are with us today.
Technology is amazing when it works.
That's right.
Cool.
That's true.
Awesome. I'm not sure if you were watching already when I gave a super quick introduction to at least a few of the many things that you do. But I like to start by asking people, like, how did you find your way into wine? Was wine on your family table growing up? Was it something you always knew you'd be interested in, or how?
Well, definitely not the latter. We came, we are originally from the West Coast. So I was born in Portland, Oregon. My family's all from the Bay Area. My mom's from Washington. My grandfather from Wenatchee, Washington. My grandfather was a teetotaler. Certainly, nobody was against drink, but wine was not the beverage of choice. I have to tell the story of my dad would come home from work. Nobody drank, right? But my dad would come home from work. Don't bother him. He goes into the kitchen. You'd hear like a couple of cubes of ice hit a glass, and you'd hear a little door open up, and hear him kind of wash a glass out, and then walk into the family room in a much better mood. That's how the day ended, I guess, for him. But I had an uncle who was my first introduction to wine. He gave me my first lesson about wine when I was 15. He lived up in the Piedmont Hills and had a little wine cellar. And he showed me Essentially, we would go out to the Bay Area every Christmas to hang out with the family because we were the black sheep. We moved to the Midwest, and so he said, "You want, when I'm 15, he's like, you want to help me pick the wine?" Well, of course I do. I've never had wine, but this sounds really interesting. And he gave me my first wine lesson. He explained Cabernet Sauvignon and he explained Pinot Noir, and just because I'm 15, of course, was like. Pinot Noir, elegant like me. So it was like I chose, and I really honestly do remember the wine. I chose Louis Martini Special Select Pinot Noir 1968, and
Uh-huh.
that was the first glass of wine I had, and I thought, this is really good. I want to do this again. And then I started working in restaurants when I was really even just before that as a
Right.
dishwasher, but I came from the restaurant business, so knowing a little bit about wine was helpful on the restaurant floor, and it was definitely fun. Plus, it was alcohol. I'm sorry. That was also fun.
I mean, seriously, if you're starting when you're 15. So this was
You know?
so in this was in this restaurant. This was in Kansas City, right? This is where you were based at this point.
Actually, I wasn't yet. We were living in central Kansas. And so I
Okay.
worked at a steakhouse in Hutchinson, Kansas, of all places, and saw wine there. But yeah, my parents moved to Kansas City while I was in college in Kansas and moved back just thinking, I just need a place to stay for a couple of weeks till I get my feet underneath me and stuck around, hung around. I
What?
found a good gig in a restaurant called Plaza 3. My first teacher was a guy named John Scupney, who some people may know of. He went on to found a winery called Lang and Reed, a
Yeah,
Cab Franc producer in Napa, and we're still good friends.
that's so cool. What
Yeah.
was the wine scene like in Kansas City at that point?
It was actually very good. I know that sounds crazy to people, but essentially the late 70s, early 80s in Kansas City just had a sort of wealth of interest and most importantly, at least to my way of looking at it, most importantly, there was a restaurant group that focused on white tablecloth, but also owned a whole bunch of houlihans nationwide. And so everybody who wanted to work for this 120 or so restaurant chain called Gilbert Robinson, and Gilbert and Robinson were both very, very sophisticated diners. If you wanted to work for them, you had to come to Kansas City and train. And usually training was 6 months to a year. And there were about, I think, as I recall, five GR restaurants in Kansas City. So you had places to train differing
Right.
formats. And the irony for me was they had a good wine training program. But if you were a really creative person in the restaurant business and you went to work for this chain group and you were training for 6 months or so and you got bored or you didn't like, the corporate life, you would quit and you would start a restaurant in Kansas City
Uh,
because it's like, well, it's right here. So we had all these little restaurants that would pop up, and a lot of them died, but they popped up, and they might only seat 25 people or they might
right.
only seat 40 people. But almost all of them, maybe not all of them, but so many of them were started by people who had learned about wine because that was part of the GR ethos. And so I'm not joking. In the late 70s, early 80s, I wrote an article about it once back then because I started writing about wine because I just thought it was fascinating. And I surveyed the top 30 restaurants in Kansas City, and each of them had more than 25 wines by the glass.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that
it just,
that's
what you
remarkable
did.
for
It,
for that era. That's incredible.
yeah, it's just kind of what you did, and of course, if one did it, everybody else has to compete.
Right.
And as I say, they were all sort of competing against each other, trying to show off, as it were. And a lot of the restaurants didn't last, but some did, and it was just a great training ground for me. I just had a bunch of buddies who were into wine, and we'd blind taste each other all the time. And I got into the wine business as a wholesaler, and I just was as happy as I could be. This was genuine fun for me.
And I've heard a lot of people describe that. I remember my dad talking about it too in this way as kind of a golden era for wine, and that sort of like early '80s time frame where there was starting to be pretty good availability of a wider range of things. Prices were still pretty reasonable, even for the very best wines. You could taste like the great wines of the world in a way that was hard before and is now hard because it's so expensive.
Yeah, honestly, the first tasting that Scuppany took me to, it was like, hey, we're going to drink a bunch of second growth Bordeaux. So everybody's got to throw 25 bucks on the table. And it's like, oh, okay. I got 25 for my shift tonight. That's cool. But yeah, Bob Haas was really one of my first if you will, teachers in all this. I was a distributor, and Vineyard Brands was in my book, and I had teachers like that who were constantly showing us things we didn't know about, and the curiosity and the enthusiasm was always contagious. And so if we found some cool new Vouvray producer or some cool new, Burgundian producer or whatever it was really quite affordable, exactly as you say. And so your enthusiasm didn't die on the vine,
Right.
as it were, because $20 would get you there.
That's cool. So at what point did you decide you wanted to make the leap from sort of either serving wine at restaurants or selling wine through the wholesale part to doing kind of research to becoming on that like master sommelier, master of wine path?
Well, that was a fairly simple decision for me. One, because I'm just a nerd, and so that's the nerd. That's the place that, yeah, exactly, place for nerds. It's like, oh, and I really have to say, I remember I went and took my advanced sommelier exam with 2 weeks notice. I didn't even know that the Court of Master Sommeliers existed. I lived in Kansas City, right? And I went there and I miraculously passed my first go on the advanced. Took me a few tries on the masters, of course, but I remember looking around and going, I don't even care if I pass this damn thing. These are my people. I've found my people, and I was trying to be, or was involved in the Master of Wine program at that point because I like to write. The
Right.
whole focus for me was I'm trying to tell people I know something about wine and I like to write about it. And no one would take me seriously. It's like a wine person from Kansas City. Oh, where's the rest of the joke? And honestly, it was like, okay, screw you people. I'll show you. I'm not an idiot. I know something about this stuff. And I did find, writing gigs back when things were written.
Right. Right. So do you remember the first article you wrote about wine?
Oh gosh, I'm sure I don't. Although I was writing for a alternative newspaper called The Pitch in Kansas City, and it's got to be certainly those were the first articles I wrote because I became their wine columnist, and I wrote a restaurant column as well under a pseudonym, and yeah, so it would be uh, yeah. Actually, it probably isn't the first article, but it may be the first article is about the most miraculous New Year's Eve party I ever went to, which was a concert with Sun Ra. But I blended it with some other stuff about my aunt from Oakland. And of course, being about my aunt, and New Year's Eve, it was should old quaint aunts be forgot? Of course, as one does. But it was about the wines you have on New Year's and great New Year's Eve, and seeing Sun Ra on New Year's Eve was life changing.
Super, super cool. Okay, so what was it like pursuing the Master Sommelier and Master of Wine um, programs at the same time? Because that sounds like each of them individually is incredibly daunting. And you decided to do them both. You're one of three people, I believe, who's ever achieved both of those.
Actually, there was a fourth, I should say, Gerard Basset, who passed away, and so then we were back to three, and now there's a fourth, Benjamin, Hoskins in Hong Kong, and he just passed, I think, a year or two ago. So you can't
Right.
swing a
Okay.
dead
Whether there's
cat
three of
without
you or
hitting.
four of you, it's still pretty rare.
Well, but I would say, in truth, for me, like I said, one, I was involved in the MW program. I didn't even know the MS program existed, and I sort of fell into it. Recognized that I come out of the restaurant business. These are
Right.
people I feel really at home with, and there is very much a Venn diagram to it. I think certainly the main reason there are so few people who do both is because so few people are so damned insecure that they need both. I mean, I'm from Kansas City. I'm like desperate. Please believe in me. But the I think for most people, it's like you finish one, you're good. I got my little not post nominals. People will talk to me now. they'll, they'll let me visit. They'll let me visit Tablas Creek now.
Yeah, I know. We're so hard to visit. Yeah, if you don't have multiple designations with letters after your name, forget it.
Yeah, get out of here.
um, cool. So you've published 3 books. Is that still right? Am I still right with that number?
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
It's been a while.
so
Again, writing. Who writes anymore? Do people read?
I mean, it's a. I don't know how many thousands of pages I've written over the years. I hope some people eventually read them.
I agree.
Um, but what was it like going from? I mean, book writing is its own kind of pursuit. It's different than writing articles. It's different than educating. What was? Did you enjoy that process?
Yes, no question about it. I think um, that it's an honest statement to say, really, the MS and the MW for me, at least initially, were a means to an end. I wanted to write more. I wanted to spend more time writing, and that at least opened those doors for me so that I could have those conversations with publishers and get something out of it. I love writing, and I haven't written much. I certainly haven't created any book drafts and book proposals of late, although I actually have a couple burning on the desk right now because it's that old rule that write the book that nobody else can write. And so I've got some stuff that I want to put out there, but I'll probably just Substack it because that's kind of the world we live in now, where the publishers are not so interested in long form. And I remember actually one of the last book proposals I was in talks with a New York agent who was she was a cliche of herself. And my favorite part about it is she calls me I'm in the back of a cab in New York when she says, well, I've done some checking and I've done a lot of talking to people. And I've decided that while I like your proposal, you're just not big enough. And I thought, wife's okay, What do you mean? I think I did make some snarky comment like that, and she's New York. She's like, aha. Anyway, So, but no, I still, so many other things, and as you know, trying to run a winery is insane,
Yeah,
and
we haven't talked about that yet.
yeah, exactly. But I think that I'm hopeful. I've got a really good team now, and I really feel like I can carve some time out to try to get back to those projects.
Well, let's talk about that. So 2017, is that right? You started Echolands?
Yeah, it's essentially found a piece of land, negotiated for it, and purchased it, and then, of course, you got to spend it's former farmland, so you got to spend a couple of years trying to prep that soil before we even planted. So initially, I thought, oh, I got a few years where I even have to figure out what the hell I'm doing. And my friend Greg Harrington was like, "You're making wine this year." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" "No, I'm not." He's like, "You're making wine this year." I'm like, "No, I'm Greg. I don't have vines. I don't have grapes." He's like, "Yeah, it's too bad. You got Block 49 Lake Helene Syrah now. I got too much Syrah. It's yours now." I'm like, "Wait, what?" It's like, "Quick, I need a winery." He's like, "Yeah, call your buddy you just bought land from, Norm McKibben. He's got artifacts. Go there. Go to Custom Crush. Make some wine." I'm like, "But I don't have a winemaker." He's like, "Yeah, you do. You met Taylor Oswald at my place earlier. Hire him." I'm like, "God damn it." It's like, so yeah, suddenly I was in it. And it was stupid of me not to realize, you only get so many chances to make wine. It's a once a year endeavor in general. And why would you wait? If you're in it, do it, go for it.
And
So,
so, what was behind your choice to choose Walla Walla as your home base?
I would say several pieces came together. One was that they approached me, that Norm McKibben reached out to me. It was as the result of somebody else reaching out to me, trying to put together a deal. It fell apart. And let's face it, I mean, Walla Walla land is affordable.
Yeah.
It's maybe a little less affordable today than it was. Well, what am I saying? Of course, it's even more affordable today than it was.
More
But
affordable than it was 3 years ago. Less affordable than it
that's
was 20 years ago.
so true. So yeah, it was certainly it was that. It was also true because I have to say this, that I felt like, if I looked at a place like the Willamette, if I looked at Sonoma, if I looked at Paso, it's like it I don't know how to say this the right way, so I'll just say it in a direct manner. Nobody needs me there. There's nothing I will bring to the party that's going to be, oh wow, nobody's ever done that before. It's like, yeah, we have. Everybody's done a lot of stuff and they're doing a really good job of it. But I felt like in Walla Walla, in my view, a lot of people were trying to make wines that were of a different place.
Right.
And I was like, no, 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 no. Walla Walla, we're much farther north. We get longer days, shorter season. It's a different environment. If we get up in the hills, it's certainly cooler and then down in the rocks. And I'd like to make wines with more moderated alcohol. I like to make wines that have a bit more acidity than what they've been generally producing. And there's plenty of people doing that now. But I really do feel when I showed up in 2017, I was like, yeah, I can actually do something here that maybe isn't really being done yet, and that to me is worthwhile. Grow some grapes maybe people aren't growing. Try to achieve some styles maybe people haven't focused upon yet. But I would also say, and this is maybe the biggest piece of it all. I'll censor myself because I won't give the exact quote, but one of my friends there, one of the guys who really mentored me is Jean-Francois Pellet of Pepperbridge and Amavi and JF, as we call him. He said, and I quote, "I'll tell you what, he's Swiss. I'll tell you what, Doug, we're going to make sure you don't F it up." And I'm like, then that's everything. I am an idiot. I am a neophyte. I have no idea what I'm doing. And here's, some really smart people who've been doing this for decades who are like, we got your back.
That's
And they
awesome.
did. They absolutely. I mean, JF within 6 months was, directing me away from a really stupid mistake I was about to make, and he's done that a couple of times, as has have others.
And I got a chance to spend a little bit of time up in Walla Walla when Hospice du Rhône was up there a couple years ago. And I was struck by a couple of things. One of them was the community that was there.
Yeah,
It reminded me in a lot of ways of Paso. It's one of the things that I think Paso kind of distinguishes itself from a lot of other regions in California is that it is such a tight community and such a cooperative community. And Walla Walla felt to me like Paso when I moved out there 23 years ago. Uh,
yeah.
with all of that like potential and energy and enthusiasm and like drive to do something great. It was cool.
I think so too. I think certainly Walla Walla, when you get right down to it, is not as complex an area as Paso is. Paso, there's a lot of options to look at. With Walla Walla, you're kind of either in the rocks or you're, near the basin of the valley, or you're up in the foothills. Depending upon where you are in the foothills, how cool or cold or wet it's gonna be. It's a little more uniform because Paso is pretty complex,
Yeah.
but it's just great that everybody, in Paso really, as you say, it's always felt like a farming community, not a marketing, choice, as opposed to places like Napa.
And was making wine yourself something that you always wanted to do?
I certainly wanted to have a deeper experience. I'd been around blending trials. I'd been around projects where I have a seat at the table and I get to talk about it too. But I certainly knew how little I knew. And there's really only one way to learn, and that's, throw yourself in the deep end. Thankfully, I certainly am not a winemaker. I never use that term, or never use the term vintner either, because I'm an owner.
Right.
And I get to participate in all the decisions. And in the words of Brian Rudine, my winemaker, somebody, you may remember this, I think it was a hospice, who somebody said, well, you work with Doug Frost. He's probably got a whole bunch of ideas. And he said, oh, Doug's got a lot of ideas and some of them are good. Which is really true. I get to do the, well, what if we, and he's like, I don't think you want to do that. And then, I've got some other ideas where he's like, why not? Let's try that. That's cool. So I really do feel like a kid in a candy shop.
Super cool. Yeah, I mean, I felt like I had the good fortune to get to spend 15 years out here working with my dad, and like watching his sort of delight as things came together, the ideas that he had, like he actually watched them come into literally into fruition. And it was so cool. It kept him going. He was coming out regularly to the winery like into his early 90s.
It's amazing, and I think such an achievement, not just the wines, but the viticulture. The vineyard and the nursery has been, for me, was one of those things where it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. What's happening at Tablas is amazing, and is having a huge impact across the country. It's teaching people things that that we desperately, need this information to know what we should do and where we should plant these, clones and varieties, et cetera, et cetera. So no, the impact that your family has had has been huge.
Thank you.
No,
Okay.
that's true. Yeah.
So a couple other things I know that you're involved in. We reconnected early last year at the best sommelier of the Americas competition
Oh,
that you
yeah.
oversee.
Yeah. Sorry
That's
about that.
super. No, it was great. It was great. I had a blast. Um, it's a super big deal in Europe. I hear European somms talk about it all the time, but it feels like it's at an earlier stage here in America. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, for sure. While the sommelier community is robust in the U.S., the Court of Master Sommeliers has been strong here for decades. Um, the group that creates the competitions that determine the best sommelier of the world, or the best sommelier of Europe, or the best sommelier of the Americas, etc., has been around about as long, about a half a century or so, much like the Court of Master Sommeliers, but was only barely active in the U.S. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the probably the simple one, it's not political, it's just sort of logistical, which is to say the Court of Master Sommeliers became very successful in the U.S. There are close to 300 master sommeliers in North America now, and this dates back to the early 80s, or certainly to the mid 80s. And the ASI, which is the giant umbrella organization, international organization that determines that creates the competitions for the best sommelier, they weren't really involved in the U.S. They were very Eurocentric, and so there was kind of a tension between them. The tension still to some degree exists in the rules, because the rules are whatever your native language is, you cannot compete in your native language. So if I'm an English speaker, I have to compete in French or Spanish. If I'm a Spanish speaker, I have to compete in English or French. And
Whoa.
while that made a lot of sense in Europe, that didn't make squat for sense in the US, it's changed now. There's just so many more people here who are bilingual, or so many people here who grew up speaking Spanish. So English is their second language, and let's go. So it's more likely that it certainly is true now that the U.S. is competing on the world stage because our candidates are bilingual and are really capable of competing in that sense. But it's been, there are different organizations and a different way of looking things, and so the ASI, as that organization is called internationally, appointed BUSA, which is the organization I run, to be the U.S. arm of ASI, or at least the U.S. chapter. And so we're trying to teach people, one, how to compete according to their rules, and two, we have to support them in maintaining their ability to be multilingual.
Huh, super cool. I didn't realize that piece of it. That makes it all the more impressive.
Yeah, it's tough. I never competed. I didn't even know the damn thing existed, which is kind of a bummer. I don't know what would have happened if I'd known about it. Probably nothing, because I am not bilingual. I barely speak English, So,
With
um,
that incentive, maybe you would have become bilingual.
well, yeah, that would have been the job, and that would have been kind of fun. Although in school, what did I study? German. They don't allow German. What's that all about?
So, one last piece that I saw, and that you created a PBS TV series on wine, or more generally on kind of fermentation.
Mhm.
So, what was it called? Ferment Nation. That was what we
Yes,
called
yes,
it,
it
right?
was.
What was the motivation like, and how did that go? And
Well, the ugly truth about my background is my undergraduate degree is in theater. And so, it was like as soon as I started getting a little bit of notoriety in my own town, I'm immediately like, how about if we do a TV show? And the TV show was great fun. It lasted a few years. We garnered, a couple of regional Emmys out of the deal, which was cool. But the idea of getting to play different characters and sort of make fun of the silliness of wine at the same time I'm getting to celebrate what's good about wine was really fun. So I did stupid things like dress up in a giant outfit that made me look like I was a bunch of grapes, and doing various characters that were, takeoffs on other characters, but mostly, people with their pinkies sticking out, talking about wines that don't exist and that sort of thing. But really trying to have some fun with it all, because there are simple lessons, I think, that teach people, at least in my view, that wine is simply a communal beverage,
Yeah.
and food is supposed to be communal, for God's sakes. I had my lunch on my way back from Walla Walla a few hours ago by myself on the plane, and every time I do that, I think this is so weird. Just to have a little bowl, a little pokey bowl, you're eating next to somebody who's reading, next to somebody who's sleeping. It's like, this is wrong. This is just wrong. It should be a communal thing.
The French hate that. Like it's one of the
Ugh.
things they cannot accept that Americans like eat lunch in their cars. Like,
It's true. It's weird. And I do it. I am
yeah.
American.
I'm curious, given your experience having done the TV series, like there's been this incredible proliferation of food on TV, but it's been a lot more of a struggle for wine on TV, and I'm curious if you have thoughts as to why.
Well, I certainly know, or I don't know, but over the years pitched ideas to various networks, and a lot of times it was, look, we're not going to support alcohol. Alcohol is controversial. We'll talk about food all day long, but when it comes to alcohol, we're skittish. And so for somebody like me who's just this unabashed, let's talk about every kind of alcohol because they're all really interesting, you know, it just didn't fit into the way they saw their best chances to remain on, let's say, Food Network or what have you. I think that's a lot of it. I think as well, that the large scale winery and the large scale food company are at very different scales,
Right.
and so there's a lot of available money in the food sector that can sponsor and support shows. But then, where the largest companies are in the alcohol beverage sector, of course, are spirits companies, and they have observed for many years a voluntary moratorium to keep off the airwaves because we wouldn't want our children to learn that we drink alcohol. Like, it was kind of like my dad who went in the kitchen, don't say anything to him, I don't know what happened, but there's a clean glass now, freshly used in clean glass. So I think it's a lot of those things together. But of course, now they're just so much narrowcasting, so many channels of media that we ought to be doing things like you're doing with this. It's just the opportunity exists for us to find our tribes again.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Well, I hope that means that there will be, and I know there certainly are. There's some cool stuff going on YouTube. There's
Yeah,
cool sort of subscription based models, and I like what Andrea Robinson is doing. I think that's
yeah.
um yeah. We'll see. I hope that you're right that sort of move towards like more niches aiming at specific things rather than trying to paint with a broad brush will allow it to flourish a little bit more.
Yeah, we should be able to find our tribes and speak to them now.
Yeah. So I'm not sure quite how to ask this question, but like you're involved in so many different things, so many different things, from your own winery to the education to the writing to the quartermaster sommelier to the master of wine program. Like, how do you balance your time? How do you decide? How do you do it all?
Well, I certainly feel like I don't do it all anymore. I feel more incompetent than ever. You know what I mean? It's like the Peter principle of just taking on more tasks until I do a bad job at many of them. I think for me, the key when it works is finding good people to work with and empowering good people to do their stuff, and then just giving them a pat on the back on a regular basis. And I have been only marginally, or at least only partially successful at that. But certainly the winery for me is working out well because I've just got this great crew. They know what the hell they're doing. I get to ask questions, and sometimes they know the answer, and sometimes we've got to figure out the answer together. But that's been really great. The Sommelier Association, that's still a thing that kind of struggles forward. I have one other project I've been doing for 20 years called Bar, which is basically it's a spirits and cocktail high level training 5-day crash course in New York City that we've been doing for 20 years. And somebody actually did a documentary about it now, which was kind of cool because mostly because after years of it being a small group of people, we opened it up. So there's like 26 different people who are now part of the faculty and the teachers and the people running the thing. Over half are female, lots more diversity and persons of color involved, so that the teachers look like the audience, and that's really really fun to do. But to a great degree now, like I said, it's now about I'm not trying to find the exit, but I need to be the old guy that sits in the back and goes, "Great job, well done. What can I do to help you?"
Awesome. So what's next for you? Like you've done all this cool stuff. Do you have I mean, you mentioned you have a couple of book ideas. Like what are you still looking forward to doing?
Well, for sure. I want to hopefully find some time to get back to doing a bit more writing. And throwing my lot in with a winery was something that I'd always thought about, and I'd always thought, I don't know that would ever work. Certainly, I don't have the money for that. Fortunately, I have one business partner who has more money than sense. And I'm sure he would agree. But the idea for me is that I have really wanted to push a lot of these other things away. I've got 3 grandkids that I love hanging out with. They're all little tiny kids so far, and I want to be around for some of that. So I'm hopeful of being able to at least push away from some of the granular tasks that are involved. But the winery, I knew if I was going to do that, you can't mess around. You got to be all in. So the winery, but it's been rewarding. It's a crazy business, and it'll make you insane as you understand better than anybody. But it's also really rewarding in its weird way.
I love the fact that in this day and age when so much of what we do is virtual or abstract, that like we make a product that people not just can like touch and feel and be a part of, but helps bring people together. Like I think that is just the coolest thing at the end of the day.
I would have to completely agree. It's why for me, throwing away those other tasks and focusing on this task is meaningful.
So cool. Well, I cannot believe that it has been half an hour, but it has been half an hour, and I do try to keep these conversations moderate for everybody's sake. So, if people wanted to learn more about Echolands or more about your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, certainly echolandswinery.com is the place to go. And, we try to do some stuff on Instagram and the usual social media sites. So, there's stuff to see. And actually, Brian and I did a little talk just last night that we'll post soon, trying to explain to people, okay, we say we have moderated alcohols. How would you do that? Stuff like that, I think is important for people to understand, that you get to make choices when you're trying to make wine, and those choices have outcomes in terms of the style of the wine.
Excellent. Well, Doug Frost, thank you so much for taking a chunk out of a Wednesday afternoon to talk with me and to share your story.
Oh, what a great pleasure to speak with you, and hope to see you at Tablas really, really soon. I need to get out there.
Awesome. I'll be here.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Cheers, everybody. I hope you all had a lovely holidays. Good New Year. Looking forward to a happy, healthy 2026. We'll see you in a few weeks.